A black family in North Carolina has to rebuild two of their homes that were destroyed by arson. The Judge family, very much involved in community service and social activism in Duplin County, believe they are being targeted because of their race. We're joined now by Beverly Judge and Aimee Durant from the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. They both join us from North Carolina. Glad to have you here. So, Beverly, first of all, tell us what happened. These homes, when did it take place? And so what's going on?
Well, on January the 26th, I was asleep and it was approximately 2:45 in the morning. I was awakened by the sound of loud crackling and realized that I was in the home alone because quite often my grandkids or my kids are there with me. And I ran to the kitchen window where I saw blazes. My 66 Mustang was on fire under the carport. I ran out of the carport, and as soon as I had cleared the carport and made it to the end of the driveway, it was another explosion, which was the van that was under the carport. And the house just began to engulf in flames from the kitchen on. But it took a while. It burned for a long time. I called 911, called the fire department, and that house burned for many hours, at least over 7 hours. It was.
And has it been declared that it's arson?
Oh, yeah, it was declared as arson that night.
Any leads from police? Anything in particular why your family has been targeted this way?
Well, we've been asked numerous questions, but we haven't received any leads as of yet. We haven't received a lot of information from the police. We have been asked different questions, and every time there's a press conference, interesting enough, I get calls then expressing their concern. But as of yet, it seems like the investigation has basically gone cold. And at later date, I moved all my things, the little things that were left that I had in the house, into my daughter's home. And a couple of months later, it was almost like a repeat. Her house was torched, her vehicles were torched. However, the response was quite different. The house was put out expeditiously, and the children were in the home sleep just like I was asleep, and my daughter was in the home sleep just as I was asleep. However, they got out just as I did, but they were met with a lot more compassion, and the fire was put out much quicker.
Aimee, what do you think is going on here?
Well, I think it's clear that the family is being targeted, and we don't know why yet. We wish we had more information at this point. But the stories that I've heard about the law enforcement reaction in Duplin County have been very concerning, to say the least. Now, as Beverly mentioned, the reaction in Jacksonville has been slightly different, and there are now more eyes on the situation. So if the same person is responsible, which we believe the same person is responsible for both arsons, then hopefully we can get some more information now.
What do you hope? What role can the public play in this?
My hope sorry, go ahead, Beverly.
Well, I just want people to start speaking up. I don't want this hate tactic to bring a fear that will keep people from speaking up and telling their stories and what's going on, because it has to change. I don't want them to be riddled with fear. I plan to move back to the property, and I want to feel safe. And I want the people who live in that county to be able to feel safe instead of to go through the torture that I went of hours and hours of watching my house burn and my mother's house burn, my family's house burn to the ground.
Aimee, go ahead.
I completely agree with what Beverly had to say, and I'll also add that the Southern Coalition for Social Justice has been working very closely with local NAACP leaders on this, and that NAACP leaders have heard from other community members that other Black families in Duplin County have experienced, not to the extent that the Judge family has, but has experienced similar responses from law enforcement when they've been the victims of crime.
All right, then. If people have any information or if they can assist, is there a website? Is there anything set up there, Rebecca? Or Aimee?
Yes, there is a website. So our website, the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, has a section that's dedicated to this issue, so they can go to our website. Beverly, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I would just like to encourage people to speak up and to know that we are, in fact, going to rebuild. And I appreciate the support of the churches and the community that have been supportive to us, and to know that we are appreciative to them and that we're going to help to build economic strength in our community and help our other neighbors that are supportive and that want to feel protected. We are fighting for you as well as you are fighting for us and our support. And there are 2 GoFundMes. There's one for my home and my mother's home, family home, and there's also one for Aisha Bullock, my daughter's home. And that will be listed. I'm sure Aimee can give information on that as well, that people can reach out and support. And I'd like to thank all of those that have supported with us thus far.
All right, then. Beverly and Aimee, we surely appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
You know, Terrain, what this story underscores is what continues to happen to African Americans in this country. When the Senate, when Rand Paul was holding up the anti-lynching bill, part of that is because the Republicans who did not want the notion of hate crimes to be expanded. And a lot of people, especially these people out here running their mouths saying, oh, we don't have any, anti-Black, we don't have any legislation to protect Black folks. Well, the James Byrd Act actually is part of that. Again, what happened after Buffalo was a domestic terrorism bill passed in the House. It's being stalled in the Senate. So you actually have those things there. But that's why the anti-lynching bill is important, because, again, things like this, hate crimes, fall underneath those bills.
Absolutely. All hate crimes, domestic terrorism will fall under this bill. But that's not what certain people in our country want to happen. They don't believe that this is a real issue. They believe that these are isolated incidents involving people of color and our families, but they are very real. Our families are being targeted, and we don't have the laws that are strong enough to really protect them. By enacting these type of laws, that would mean that our police, that our government would actually have to take some of these right nationalist organizations on. And I dare to say, there have been cases where it's been determined that some of the local police officers are members of these organizations, so they would be actually acting against their own interests. So until we get to the root of the issues inside our police department, inside our elected officials, we're not going to get the legislation that we need to protect Black families. And that's, again, it's sad. This is where we are in this country. And, to go back to what we're talking about with the January 6th and then bringing it back here with this, when people are voting for elected officials who are going to look out for our communities, whether you're Black, brown, white, and making decisions about anti-lynching, about domestic terrorism, we're not asking you to fall in love with these candidates. So we're asking you to make decisions that show your compassion and your hope and dreams for this country. And that's not what's happening. And until people take a real look at that, we're not going to move the needle here. And it is about having more courageous conversations with our friends and our neighbors. I have a good friend here in Denver, Colorado, Regina Jackson, and she and one of her friends, they have this program called Race to Dinner, where they invite white women to host dinner parties with their other white conservative friends, and they seriously drill down. And that's what it's going to take, is us having these real courageous conversations so that we can get this legislation that we need to protect our families.
And Michael, again, when we talk about, why you have to have legislation, you have the legislation. This is where law enforcement must do its job to find out who these perpetrators are.
Absolutely. Reading about this, Duplin County appears to be a county of about 50,000 residents, 51% white. The hog farming is the dominant industry. And I wanted to know, maybe you can answer this, Roland. The home, I think it was Rebecca's home, Beverly, I think it was Beverly's home. It was on 20 acres of land. Was that farmland or was that an estate? Would you happen to know?
Not sure.
Okay. The other thing, so yeah, this is reminiscent, man, of African Americans who become prosperous and their homes burned down, their land burned down. This is one of the reasons why some of us left the South during the Great Migration. But the other thing, just to go back to what you were talking about, the hate crimes bill and James Shepard bill, 2009. Which is signed into law by
that was the James Byrd Matthew Shepard bill.
James Byrd Matthew Shepard.
James Byrd Matthew Shepard.
For African Americans who say we don't have a hate crimes bill, it's important for you to understand that the first hate crimes bill signed into law in the history of this country was in 1968. It was signed into law by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. It was part of the Fair Housing Act in 1968. It came as a result of the civil rights movement and was largely for African Americans. If you go to justice.gov, which is the official website of the Department of Justice, and search for hate crimes, they got the documentation there. The first hate crimes bill was largely for African Americans. This is what happens when you don't understand history. And you say stupid ass nonsense like, oh, the Asians got a hate crimes bill, because you don't read. Okay. And then also the Department of Justice was created in 1870 during Reconstruction, largely to enforce the new rights for African Americans. So we've got to study history and law.
Indeed. Kelly, when we talk about, this case, as they are investigating for arson, when we talk about, other incidents that have happened, for all the people out there who keep saying, oh, no, we don't see this race stuff. No, we do. Y'all don't. And this still speaks to how blind so many people are to the realities of what it means to be Black in America.
And it's frustrating, right? Because they don't see it, because frankly, it is a privilege to not have to see it. If you aren't able to see the racism that's going on in this country, in my humble opinion, it's because you choose not to, because it is obvious. And the fact that you don't see it in itself is a privilege. But incidents like this really frustrate me, and I'm sure everyone else, but the bar for what constitutes a hate crime is so incredibly high that even when it's obvious, you still have to jump through God knows how many hoops in order to be considered a hate crime in the eyes of the law. And that goes back to since hate crime bills have been in existence, right? Because of the racism in this country, they want the scrutiny to be so high so you can get away with more crap. And it reminds me of a couple years ago here in the DMV, Maryland specifically, a Bowie State senior. He was going to graduate 3 days after he died. He was stabbed to death by a racist, and if I'm not mistaken, the murderer in that case was not charged with a hate crime, or they tried to charge him and it didn't stick because of the level of scrutiny it took to prove that he was racist in the course of murdering this young Black man, even though his Facebook was full of racial rhetoric, and he was joining groups that were centered on white supremacy and the like. But because he didn't call him an N-word as he was stabbing him, all of a sudden, and it was just a simple murder, that makes no sense, right? And until we have laws on the books that do not involve you having to say the N-word to somebody in the commission of such an act, we're going to keep having to deal with crimes that frankly should be given higher levels of punishment, but they aren't, because racists don't know when they're being racist. And the people who aren't being quote unquote racist choose not to see racism. And that's the frustration that we deal with.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Black power.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?